Well, there's something to be said though about that consistency. I think most people, if you are consistent about anything, if it's okay, I've got to send 300 emails. I got to send 300. We'll use this social media example you gave. I've got to message 1,000 followers on Instagram. That is an overwhelming task.
Oh, yeah.
And then you just freeze. You're like, it's too much. I can't do it. Well, if you just said, I'm going to message five a day. Can you handle five a day?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just do it. And before long, you'll look back and go, "Oh, wow, look how far I came." So that, I mean, that's just one thing. If it's like, I need to make one good contact this week in the business that will help me in my career, just one a week.
Right.
That's a very manageable goal. You
And
know, I
you could do that on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
You don't even have to leave your house.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's true. It's true. But then I think those consistent steps are what propels people forward. And you'll look back a year from now and go, "Oh, wow, I never thought." But I think people bite off too much at the beginning and go, "A
You
thousand
do.
messages? There's no stinking way I'm gonna do 1,000 messages." You go, "Well, you could if you start now."
Yeah.
It's
I
that
think that
old, how do we grow this big tree in our business? How do we grow this big, huge tree? And people are always, we use it in the finance business talking about growing your wealth. People
Mhm.
talk about, how do I build this big tree? I should have planted this tree 20 years ago.
Right.
And it's like that old proverb. Well, but you didn't. So when's the second best time to plant a tree?
Right.
It's today. Today's the second best time to plant. But start now, start something, even if it's baby, baby, baby steps.
Right.
And you'll never look back and go, I wish I would have waited longer.
The first step is the hardest. I
Yeah.
said the hardest is to start. The second hardest is to start again.
Uh,
So if you've paid your dues and you're doing the stuff and then you decide you're going to stop and you have to come back, you're going
mhm,
to have to pay those dues again.
mhm.
And that is really, really hard. I've done it with some people and it worked with some people and it didn't work for some other
Yeah.
people, but life happens. You have to understand that life happens. Whatever is going on, sometimes somebody gets sick, sometimes you get sick, sometimes, you have all of a sudden you have a daughter that wants to go to soccer camp and it costs millions of dollars to do it. You got to get more money. And I'm all for supporting your life, whatever it is. And so I'm okay giving you even having a side job. The side job, though, let it be in the entertainment industry so you can still keep growing. So do video production, do anything, work sound in a venue, whatever it is. My thing was always when I came out here was to always have a job in the industry. It
Mhm.
didn't matter what it was, but I saw how, because I worked with a voiceover guy one time and I used to promote him when there was a new person on radio and TV kind of thing and like a new manager. And he loved to hear me actually like pitch him. But the big deal for me was I called one time and the girl said, "Oh, yeah, we can take something." And she says, "What's your name?" I said, "It's Chris Fletcher." She goes, "I knew a Chris Fletcher that used to work for bands." I said, "I do." And she goes, "Chris, it's Rhonda. Remember, I used to do your interviews from Music
Uh,
Connection." And
uh,
you know what? I was like, look how close the entertainment industry is. It's not just music, it's entertainment. And so you can always grow in between that. So interesting that it's not as big a world as you think it is, that
right.
people know people and all that kind of stuff. Even the guy I know he had a production job for the TV show out here. And what do? They have rap parties. And when they have the rap parties, his band plays. And who's at the rap party? All the music directors. So then before he knew it, all his their songs were on the TV show.
Mm,
So life is interesting again and stuff, but it's a small world.
yes. Yeah, it is. It is. Well, I think in the end, the musician desires to make money doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
In the end, I would love this to support me full time so I can do this full time. And, but I think also many musicians assume the only way to make money is through touring and streaming.
Yeah.
Nowadays, that's the perspective. But the fact of the matter is, right, there's a lot of other ways musicians can monetize their skills.
Oh,
So let's talk about, what kind of jobs or income streams are musicians often overlooking? even when you talk about, even just these parties, like this example of the party and
Yeah.
meeting people, what kinds of income streams are people often overlooking?
There there's 'cause I work with so many musicians, there's so many weird jobs you never even thought
Mhm.
of, even being a piano tuner, like, every time they move a piano, they gotta do that. I had a guy one of the guys, a guitar player I know, he was on the road, and when the pandemic hit, I called and said, "How you doing?" And he said, "Well, my friend's in advertising, and he asked me to go on would I be willing to go on the Billboard charts and pull, 10 songs off and just do those songs instrumental,
Mm.
just on guitar." And he said, "I can do that." And so if you go to any elevator in Los Angeles and you hear somebody playing an instrumental guitar for a well-known song, it's him. Who thought that was a job? Didn't even know
Right.
that was a job, that kind of stuff. So there's just so many different things. Most people want to do session work,
Mhm.
where they play with other people and stuff like that. And my friend done that for years. He played hammer piano. And so when he went in one time, of course he didn't tell him it was Guns N' Roses. And so
Right.
they liked what he did. And 2 days later called, he was an original band I work with. And he was like, okay, this is how much money you make. This is how long you've been going on. This is you. Do you want to do it? And he was like, I got to go. So
Yep.
he went and kinda give you the idea how much money you can make, you come back and buy a house with it kinda thing. But the biggest deal was how many well-known musicians go to see Guns N' Roses and takes his card, and he has been a touring musician for 25 years. He never set out to do that.
Yeah.
It just happened. He loved it. He loves it. Still doing it. Loves it,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And so by doing that stuff, the girl I talked to yesterday, she was like, "Oh, I'm a singer and, I've been trying to get in the singing network." And I said, "There's a singers network here. It's called SAG-AFTRA. You need to kind of be a part of that." And she was like, "Well, I'm part of this, I'm part of this." I said, "No, you need to go to SAG-AFTRA. You need to meet other people doing it
Yeah.
because they'll get their own job, but then when they're doing something bigger, they'll have you substitute for them, that
Okay.
kind of stuff." And so the one girl said, "I want to do voiceovers." I said, "Well, Sarah, I knew does voiceovers. She goes out on the road with people. Let me see if I can email you back and forth."
Yeah.
So I emailed them, and she said, when I talked to Sarah first, and she said, "Oh, we the singers, we all meet like every week for breakfast somewhere." So they went to breakfast, and 3 weeks later, she was here. I am doing my first voiceover. How
Great.
interesting that it's all about. And the other girl I work with, and I told her story because she was on the panel yesterday, and they were saying, like, sometimes it's just being there, just knowing where to go. And there was a jam here, and a lot of Brazilian artists went. She was Brazilian, and she said, "Ugh." She says it's 11 o'clock at night. And she's every time I go, somebody wants to hire me to sing or to play piano or something like that. And I said, "Take a nap, girl, and go."
Yeah.
So
Sure.
sometimes it's just going. It's not easy to go. I know you don't want to, or it's too late. So once in a while, you got to go and bring somebody with you, right?
Mhm.
And a couple people said to me, I have stage fright, or I don't know where to go to start playing. I said, go to an open mic night and just go to see how it feels. Who's going to be in the audience? Other musicians. They're going to help you with that kind of stuff, right? They're going to give you praise and all that kind of stuff. I said, but you got to get up there, and then you can do one song and feel cool about it. And then you can go to other ones or stay at that one, kind of do that stuff. And you'll meet other musicians there. So it's about meeting people who are if you wanna sing at a restaurant or something like that, and there's a band or there's a musician there, get to know them because what's the deal is that they may call you up to do a couple songs and they go, "Oh, you'd be a great sub for me. So when I have something else to do, I will call you." Whether it's a DJ or it's a solo musician or somebody in a band. So that's you got to know other people doing it and
Yeah.
try to get into that somehow. There are meetup groups online,
Yeah.
so you can do that kind of stuff, but it's about getting out and being in trying to find other musicians that do stuff. And of course, they'll get their gig first and then they'll get a gig. But I always, there's enough work out here for everybody. Yes, it's very competitive, but
Mhm.
there's enough work for everybody when you
Yeah.
think about it, kind of stuff.
And there's
So,
such a wide variety of ways to, I mean, even if it's not what you wanna do full time,
right.
to make this side money and, the side hustle, as we say.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's you talked about tuning a piano or even if it's teaching or lessons on the side. I know several that are doing that. Writing for other artists, you find some things you're good at that you can do that you can do it. But it goes back to like you're saying, it's you got to know people. If you don't know anybody, if you don't meet people, if you don't ever leave your house, you have a hard time continuing to get business.
Yeah. And
Uh,
playing your music in your garage, the guy with the big cigar is not going to find you then. It's the
yeah,
same
that's right.
point, you
That's
know,
right.
kind of
That's right.
stuff. So
Well, there.
it's really interesting. I mean, the whole thing about just, just doing something on the side is it depends. We had I work with a couple musicians that were singing at churches and they needed sheet music. And we all know there's a program for sheet music, but they don't want to do it. So we found somebody that would do our songs for $35. She didn't live here. She lived in Portland. And so we would send it to her and tell her, what we wanted to do with it. The next day she'd give it to us. And so people were like, wow, like you have real music now. What happened? And
Yeah.
we have a girl that would do this stuff. They'll go, "Can you give me your number?" So can I give you your number? Yeah, sure. She was a musician too. So then a month later, she goes, "Stop giving my name out because I'm a musician too, you know. I have too much work now." So
Uh-huh.
just knowing that little program,
Yeah.
that she just started a side, she didn't even try to do a side job. She just did a favor for us, kind of stuff.
Sort of.
So any of those little programs that you learn for yourself, you can do it on your own time and make money doing that.
Mm.
So really amazing, the weird different things that you can do. I mean, even think about if you want to write songs for TV and film and stuff like that. Yes, it might be hard to break into, but think of all the networks we have. Who has series? Hulu, Amazon, like, Spectrum has
Everything.
their own channel kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And you can write songs for them, and then you have some credits, and then you can get into the bigger things,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. We can
Yeah.
start at a lower level and get the credits, and then it shows, oh, they're writing for this and this and this. So they'll give you a chance, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So writing songs, I mean, there are the two biggest ways for musicians to make money is placements, TV, film, whatever other kind of networks or our media, and touring. Because those two things belong to you. The royalties keep coming if they have the advertisement on over and over again.
Yeah.
But those two things y- belong to you unless you give somebody a piece of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's other ways, but if you want to concentrate on making money on streaming, you need to find someone who knows how to do that. I know a guy that spent 5 years learning how to do that for himself. And when he got it, he now works for a small label and to do that. So he
Mhm.
makes some really good money doing that. And he learned Pro Tools for himself. So now he's teaching Pro Tools,
Yeah. See. Yep.
that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
I love
So
it. I
so
love it.
interesting, you
Yeah.
know just keeping your eyes and ears open. If somebody what even somebody, and I say every musician will also sometime in your life will ask, will you teach me? And they'll ask you to do session work. They just will, whether you set out to do it or not,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of possibilities out there, but you got to take the chance. You got to,
That's
look
right.
to see
You
what
can
you want to do and stuff like that. And you can say, I want to do voiceovers.
mhm. Get
Take a
out there,
voiceover class.
and pursue it and try it. You know.
That's the way to go.
Let's talk about other people's money. I This is an area a lot of artists don't fully understand. Chris, you worked with artists on things like sponsorship and grants and funding opportunities, and I want to talk about how musicians can, fund their careers and maybe even, especially without taking on personal debt,
Right.
things like this.
Yeah. You know, when we got the Budweiser sponsorship years ago for one of my bands, we didn't set out to get it. They went to a local radio station here who had a local program and said, what are the 5 top unsigned bands in Los Angeles? And he said it was us. And then we went and we did a little show for them, and we were so loud, I thought they hated us, and they're like, "We loved you." I'm like, "You did?" Right? So they had what they called an unsigned band sponsorship they were doing, and they took 5 cities and put 5 and spoke and picked 5 bands in each city to support. But we were doing 100 shows a year
Mm.
already. We already could fill the Roxy with 400 fans. So sponsorship and endorsements means they want to know how many eyes are on you. So this is when social media counts. This is when it counts because they know sponsorship people that they always say, if you are playing in a festival and you're wearing a certain hat or you're drinking a water or whatever it is, that 89% of the people in the room will try it.
Mhm.
And I'm like
Interesting.
part of the 11% though. I realize, people are like, "Oh, I love those boots. Where are they?" And I'm like, "They're good boots," and I move on. I mean, I'm not motivated that way, but they
Mhm.
think you'll try it and then you'll go, "Oh, I like this."
Mhm.
And if it
Mhm.
didn't work, they wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Sure.
where the numbers count, but you can go to smaller companies too. Things like I had a band that was going up and down the West Coast doing colleges and festivals and stuff like that. So they used to go 2 of them in the band, or 6 of them, they used to go in and wear hats. And so they went to this local hat place that they always went, and they go, the girl came in, after like the second time they went in there, like, it's funny, like every 3 or 4 months you come out, you guys both buy a hat. And they said, oh, we're in a band. And she was like, do you have a merch table?
Mhm.
Like, yeah. She goes, well, maybe you'd be willing to do this, but maybe every time that you come in, you can take 2 hats, whatever you want for free. And I'll get a little display and some cards so people can get us online. And she said, I'll pay you $300
Mhm.
to do that for us. So, like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then one of the girls in the band, she had really curly hair. So she used a product. We went to them and said, "Hey, we're going on the road. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. Do you ever sponsor anybody?" And they were like, "Oh, wow. Oh, sure." And we didn't tell them like how much. They're like, "Can we give you $600 when you go out and you'll put a display on and we'll send you stuff that people like take off the table?" Like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. So it can be small. It doesn't have to be large, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, And so that's important, that's important. Endorsements means product, sponsorship means money, and maybe some product here and there, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then I saw all these people doing crowdfunding, and I was like, how are they making money? Look at all the money they're making, right? So I started looking at some of the stuff, and they had a little video. And so if you have a half decent, if you have 3 to 500 people on your email list, then you could probably do a crowdfunding with it, whatever you want to do, Kickstarter, or Pledge, or not GoFundMe. That's for like charity
Right.
stuff.
Right.
But you do a video, tell people what's going on with it, and then you give them you can pre-buy the CD at
Right.
$25. You can do this. So you give them opportunities
Mhm.
to pre-buy things. Because I am musicians going, I hate to ask for money.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're not doing that. You don't have to you have to understand they're pre-buying from you,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. And so, but I was like watching people like, man, they're making a lot of money. And then I started thinking about it. So I said, when I went to class the other day, I said, so if my niece is selling Girl Scout cookies, because I've been seeing them all around, and I bring them in and go, look, my niece is selling Girl Scout cookies. Anybody want any? Like, yeah, I'll buy a box. Now what they're doing is people are sending, my niece is in a band. Can I send you their link and you'll donate? And
Mhm.
they don't really even care about the band, but they have 400 people that paid them $25 to get a CD that they
Yeah.
never play,
Uh,
that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow. It's so you look to see what everybody else is doing, whoever's successful, and see what they're doing. And you got to really promote it
right.
online, have people share it, all that kind of stuff. But
Yep.
that's a way to kind of make money. I knew somebody who did it by himself, did not do the sharing. He put an email out and said, look, I need $10,000 to record and promote my music. If you donate, this is what I'll do for you, that kind of stuff. And he funded his project that way.
It's great.
And
It
so
does happen. I've seen it happen recently with several bands, actually, surprisingly, that surprisingly that it's so many popping up, doing documentaries, for example.
yeah,
And they want to do some video documentary, they want to raise money for it. And so yeah, I'm like, yeah, if you give me a copy of it, I'll pitch, in the end and things like that. And I think people are happy to support. We don't like asking for money. It's different. It's very different than you mentioned the GoFundMe. The GoFundMe happens all the time.
right.
It,
Yeah.
I see it a lot, and most of the time you see a GoFundMe, it's some heartbreaking situation. Something has come up.
Mhm.
The music industry does well in churning money, but artists have not done well in retaining the money, let's say.
Right.
And so and how do we spend it in a proper way? How do we spend it? Do smart spending? How do we even plan for the future? Well, my margins are so thin or whatever, how do you do that? And it really is, I think, comes to, I would say it's about control. How do you
Yeah.
put yourself in a position where you're more in control of your money, And we could have those conversations about the labels and how that works, but not the point of this conversation. It's that understand the difference.
Yeah.
The GoFundMe is much different than the Kickstarter campaign for a cause, for a purpose, for an end goal that the fans are going to get something back for, right?
And look, the kind of the newest one of that is a subscription service called
Yep.
Patreon.
Patreon. Yep.
So for $4 a month, this is what we'll give you. For $10 a month, I'll give you this.
Mhm.
And then this automatically comes to you, whether it's through, and make sure you have a PayPal and a Zelle and
Mhm.
a Venmo and all those, because when I still go out and help some of my musicians with shows and stuff like that, I'm so surprised people have cash. You know,
Yeah.
I thought I was the only one to carry a $20 bill with me. When
Mhm.
they give me cash, or when they, even if we have a credit card machine that we can take for that stuff too,
Mhm.
they say, "Oh, you have a Venmo?" And they pay me on Venmo.
Mhm. Mhm.
The the venues are still paying checks. Now, it's not automated. Very rarely do they automate.
Interesting.
So there's just somebody said, "You still get checks?" And, "Oh, yeah, I still get
Yeah.
checks."
Yeah.
But we have mobile deposit now, so
Yeah. Right. Right. Thank God.
go back in.
Like, oh, I got this.
Um,
What do I do with
but
this?
yeah, I mean, there's just different ways, and you know what? Having a great merch item, whether it's a shirt or a hat or whatever it is, and and more people are getting smart about it. So I had a friend who was he every once in a while was playing at a church out here. So I went to see him one day, and he had this shirt, and really big it said "Choose Love" on it, right?
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh," and he sold his last one. And I said, "Oh, I didn't see that shirt before." He goes, "I wrote a song for the church when I went called Choose Love. I can't keep this in stock." So
Mhm.
people are using their song titles
Yeah.
for the shirt
Yeah.
and putting their logo somewhere else,
Mhm.
right? And also being smart. I mean, it's really hard to carry all that stuff. So people are, small, medium, large, extra large, all those kind of things. The sizes are killers when you're moving that stuff. So a lot of people are just carrying a large and extra large and have a sample of the medium and the small, and then working with one of those print on demand companies.
Mhm.
So if you want a small, they have a QR code that you can go like this and you can order right in front of them. And then you won't get as much money, but you won't lose the sale.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
people are getting smart about that stuff. When the pandemic started, and my roommate went to the first concert she went to at the Hollywood Bowl, I said, "Let me ask you a question. Is there a merch table?" She was like, "I don't remember if I saw a merch table." And I was like, "Yeah, this is where it's gonna have a problem." Because they won't be able to come to the table, that kind of stuff. And so people started to get, in 2019, people didn't know what a QR code was.
Right.
Because I went to a conference and we didn't bring we just on the poster, we put a QR code so they could see the video, and it was for college students. And I thought everybody knew what that was in 2019. And I'm going, "You want to see a video? Got your phone? Uh-huh. Go like this." And they're like, "What?" They go like this, and they were like,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, yeah.
Everybody kept coming, and then, the pandemic, everybody knows what a QR code
That's
now.
right.
Everything
That's
has a
right.
QR code.
It's like
And yes, and
normal now.
even if you have a card or a flyer or something like that, people take it before they throw it away. They're gonna hit that QR code,
Yep,
right?
yep.
So, and for a tip, all kinds of stuff that we're doing with that kind of stuff
Mhm,
now.
mhm.
So, technology is great. Sometimes it's not. When we start talking about AI and all the
Yeah.
creation taken away and all that kind of stuff. But we have to roll with the punches here.
Mm.
Technology is going to keep going, and you can't go, I'm just not going to do social media. You're
Right.
like, come on, this is crazy. But I do a class, grant writing class at school because
Mhm.
I started doing grants years ago because I went to a booking conference and the California Arts Council said, you want to know how to do grants? Come at 8 o'clock in the morning. We'll give you breakfast. I'm like, okay. Down there. And I was like, you know what? I can do this.
Yeah,
You know, it
yeah.
wasn't easy, but I did it. And then I didn't know that you could go watch them judge it. And my friend came back and she said, I said, I don't know how I did, because it was a 15-page application form. And she said, you were in the top 5%. And I said, I was? And she
Yeah.
said, yeah. So I said, okay. So I started helping other musicians do that kind of stuff. So I kind of know what they're looking for. And they want
Mhm.
to keep it simple. And and also people didn't know about grants till the pandemic, right? There are still grants. Verizon has a Verizon Digital Ready grant, it's called. They give it to new businesses, business need help. They do it twice a year. They give $10,000 grants out. All you have to do is fill out the application and say who you are and what's going on. They said, and if you don't get it this time, try it again next time.
Criminal.
They give
Yep.
100 grants a year out.
Wow.
There's
Wow.
there's plenty. All the big companies give stuff like that out.
Yeah. I think
So
there's so many opportunities out there. It's just a matter of, you know, keep your eyes open, look around, get creative, find ways to hustle, right? Really, and it's find ways to think outside the box. Musicians are such a creative group,
right,
and
they won't
when it
use the other side of their
yeah,
brain.
we need the other side of the creative, right? The fight gets get financially creative now, and you do really need to get financially creative
Yeah.
to make it in this business a lot of the time, and that's where kind of we touched on, on the control side. I think, you know, Chris, that reminds me of when we first met. You attended a webinar I did for musicians about building financial systems that
Right,
behind their careers,
right.
how to reposition themselves. A lot of artists focus on how to earn money for the music, but not how to manage and control the money once it comes in. And
Mhm.
there's a big hole there, I think,
Right,
in the industry. And one of the things that I've been teaching musicians is how to employ this financial strategy, or it's a way of life, really, using the right vehicle to create liquidity so that they can fund albums and tours and gear without relying on banks and labels over time, without, trying to balance out the ebb and flow of your career.
right,
You're going up and down. And, when you work with artists who start making money from gigs or merch, what's the next step? It's, well, we're going to spend it on this, that, or the other. But
right,
how often do musicians set aside, any of us, right, in life? How do we set aside any excess we have for down the road, for a long-term perspective,
right.
you know?
And is how you manage all that money. I've been working with a musician by the name of Harold Payne for 20 years. And when I started working with him, um, I started in August, and in January, it was like, oh, to put tax stuff together. I go, oh, but you use Quicken, right? And he goes, well, I don't put everything on there. And I was like, what? So
Everything.
for 2 weeks. This is why musicians don't wanna do taxes because
Yeah.
they go, "Ugh," about it because it took me 2 weeks. He kept every receipt. I had to put all that together and then put it in so we could have a report and all that kind of stuff. And so I said, "Listen, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna get a box, and every receipt that you keep or a drawer, wherever you keep it, and just put it in there. And at the end of the week, I'll take it out. I'll put it into your Quicken so we have everything. and I'll file stuff. And he said, no, I need to learn. I'm like, okay. He doesn't even remember this. It was so long ago. And so for a year, I stood on him. And at the end of the week said, okay, time to do the finances. I'm like, what is that? It's the phone. Okay. Put down the phone category.
Mhm.
So, right
Mhm.
at the end of the year, I pushed the button and I pulled the box out. I said, see this box? I said, yeah. I said, see this piece of paper? He said, yeah. I said, this is your taxes. He was like, what? I
Uh-huh.
said, this is your taxes. So now he walks in, hold on, let me put the deposit in.
Yeah.
Every single week, I, he sits on the program and I look at the bank and we make sure we have everything in there.
Yep.
He wants to do it now. And you should want to know where your money is and that kind of
Right.
stuff. But when I talk to musicians about money or doing that, their eyes roll back into their head. I'm
Yeah.
like, it's really simple. And I said, if it's too difficult for you, get a bookkeeper that'll come once a month to kind of do it for you. And then they can explain to you, this is the income statement. This is how much money you have. This is how much you spent. This is what's left over, kind of stuff. And so, uh, people, I mean, I think they're just afraid they don't have enough money. I don't know what the deal is, but they don't want to talk money. People negotiating what
Yeah.
what they're going to do. They did it the other day where they were getting people in groups and like talking to them about negotiating a price and stuff like that. And I said, I just got a call the other day that a girl next week wants my artist to play. And so she started telling me about her group and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this is not going to be easy. And then she said, oh, yeah, just he can come and do his thing. And I said, well, how long do you think he's going to play? She goes, oh, maybe about 3 hours. I said, oh, that's not going to happen.
Mhm.
This is not going to happen. Right. And I said, and do you have a budget? Well, we're paying for it, but I'm sure he'll be fair. And I said, I have to talk to him because
Yeah.
this sounds like a nightmare of a situation being with eighth graders that are graduating and their moms. And I'm like, eighth graders? They don't want to listen to that. Cause so today I have to talk to him because he's in the studio. I mean, he'll do it, but we got to talk about money. I mean, I got to start high and see if she's
Yeah.
willing to pay it or not because it's going to be a lot of work to do that
Yep.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
So if she says no to is it no? What's the lowest we can go down to, right? For the amount of work that he has to do.
Mhm.
Negotiations is not, you just have to play with it more than
Yep.
anything else. But you learn that the worst thing to do is to say, oh, it's $1,000. And they say, okay. You're like, shoot, I should have asked for more money.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
That
Oh,
kind of stuff. But
I
there's
could have.
no way for you to know that,
Right, right. I think
So
it's all
when I'm teaching my Get Engaged class, I say, okay, if you're going to get a festival, this is about how much they play. If there's
Mhm.
this is what you can ask for. If you're playing at a club and you can't they want you to bring 30 people to the door, you have to understand how they make money. They make money on the drinks. So they need 30 people an hour to buy a beer.
Mhm.
So if you don't bring 30 people in to buy a beer, they're not going to have you back again.
Mhm.
You have to understand how they're making money so you can make money too, right? And so that's how you figure out, a place to make money. I said, if there's something they have a sponsorship button, guess what? Or they say you don't have to advertise. We have people coming all the time. That
Mhm.
means they have money to pay you, that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
important just to yeah, I know it's uncomfortable, but don't lowball yourself.
Right,
You
right.
know,
And do what works for you.
yeah.
If you're not gonna do it for that, then don't do it. But sometimes you take the hit a little bit to get somewhere too as
And you
well.
gotta
So
learn,
about
you
it
know? The
about it.
singer-songwriter that I've been working with for 2 years, she really wasn't playing that much, and I said, "Okay, girl, we need to start playing." So I said,
Mhm.
"Let's look at your city. Let's see if there's anything the city does," right? So they had
Mhm.
a couple little things that they did every year, so she got accepted. Solo artist went in, did 45-minute set and got paid $500. She said, "I've never gotten paid $500." And then
Yeah.
she started doing some of this other gigs. She paid, like, 2 hours for, like, $200. She came out, she said, that was a lot of work for $200. I said,
Mhm.
you need to learn, is that acceptable for you or not?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Because
Right.
sometimes you need to learn to see if it is or not. Because people are like, oh, you're just coming in and singing for an hour, but it takes you rehearsals and getting there and,
Yeah.
and it's a lot. It's a lot. People don't like, you're just coming in
Right.
singing for an hour.
Yep.
How much money do you want? Like, well,
Right.
first of all, people are coming in to see me and you're making money. That's why
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it goes.
Yeah. I love it. It's so true. I mean, it's know your worth,
Yes.
but also be humble about it as well,
Right.
I think.
Exactly. But
Well, Chris,
the artist I was talking about, he's a multi-platinum songwriter.
mhm,
So sometimes people don't know, I'm like, did you look at the website?
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Like, whoa, oh,
Yeah, I
that's
have to look at the
what
website
that's why.
first, and then
Yes,
you can talk to
that's
me kind of stuff. So, and because he would do anything for anybody, he has to go through me because he will always lowball. Sometimes I'll look on the calendar, and go, "What's this on the 14th?" Oh yeah, they called me. I'm like, do you know where it is? Do you know how much money they're paying?
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Like, oh,
No,
we'll get those details later. Oh no, we'll get them now.
yes, that's
Like, let
right.
me do it. Let me
That's
do
right.
that kind of stuff.
That's great. Well,
So
Chris, as we kind of land this plane, I mean, we could obviously talk for another hour, but tell the listeners how they can find you, more information about you and what you're up to. And
yeah, so you can find me at Music Biz Mentors with the S on the end.com or at gmail.com, either one. And I have a podcast called Making Money, Making Music that I have some stuff out. I'm going to be relaunching a whole lot more. It's interviews with musicians that do it for a living. And I let them just tell their story
mhm,
because you think you're going to be here, but then you end up there. And then, where do they make their money and all that kind of stuff. And I periodically do. So if you get on the email list for me, I'll let you know when I'm doing panels. If I do a panel in person, I also do it online so you can see it. And so I'll be doing a couple panels coming up, one on gigs, one on how to place your songs and that kind of stuff. And the kind of really the basic kind of stuff. And I'll do a webinar once in a while and stuff like that. And in April, I start doing some group coaching where they would come with me for for like a month, 4 or 5 weeks, the same day and time every week, and 2 or 3 musicians in the room, so we can work on whatever their projects are, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and they don't have to pay a lot of money, but they get a jump start to do stuff.
mhm,
One of the girls I'm doing, she meets with me every week for two. This is our second year that we're working on. We meet every week for an hour, right? And she just pays a fee, and then I work on stuff, and she works on stuff because it's hard to do stuff by yourself. It's just you can't get accomplish everything, that kind of stuff.
great,
So that's basically
yeah,
the outside kind of stuff that I do, and then I'm teaching and stuff like that. And
great,
I work with, so I do some coaching. I have 3 or 4 people I coach all the time, and then I have a couple artists that I manage, right? So I'm involved in everything for them.
great, great. Well, we will put your link in the description for this podcast so the viewers can go there. They can track you down that way. You guys, it'll be headed on over to musicbizmentors.com. And again, I'll put the link in the show notes and go from there. But yeah, Chris, thanks so much for sharing your experience and giving musicians a practical way, a practical look at how they can build momentum in their careers. I really appreciate it. I think there's a pretty high chance we'll have you back on down the road. I'm always bummed that time flies by so fast. And I'm like, oh, with people, we have good conversations. I'm like, man, we could do easily put out 3 hours of content here.
I
All right.
big thing.
Well, I appreciate you being on, and I know the listeners do too. And for everyone listening, the goal here is simple. It's take what you heard today and apply 1 or 2 ideas this week. Baby steps, right?
That
Making money is step one. Step two is having a system so that money actually builds your career instead of disappearing between tours, for example. And once you start generating income with your music, the next step really is learning how to keep control of that money so it actually supports your career longer. And if you'd like to explore that side of things, that's where I come in. Call me and let's show you how. You can also head on over to my website, grab a free copy of the Musician's Guide to Infinite Banking at 1024wealth.com/music. And meanwhile, thanks for listening to Backstage Money. Chris, thanks for being on, and we will see you guys next time.
thank you so much.